So, does the Bible teach that the earth is flat? Well, this is a popular topic lately, and I'm going to disappoint everybody. The Bible does not teach that the earth is flat, and neither does it teach it's a sphere. The Bible is completely silent as to the shape of the earth in a cosmological sense. The popular verses we hear that supposedly support the idea that the Bible teaches the earth is flat, you will hear verses like the circle of the earth or the four corners of the earth. And what you're missing there is when the Bible is using that word earth, the Hebrew word there is actually just means the land as opposed to the sea. So this is navigational talk. These were seafaring people. These were people who traveled great distances, and they had a navigational perspective of the earth. Just like us today, they divided the earth north, south, east, and west. The sun rose in the east back then and set in the west. And so they would divide the earth up into a navigational perspective. This is how they traveled and didn't get lost. And so if we're talking about the four corners of the earth, they're just simply saying the whole domain, everywhere, all around, from all directions, navigationally. They weren't thinking of the earth as a sphere or a globe in a cosmological sense at all. This is just practical talk. This is navigational talk. This is not cosmological talk whatsoever. And so to impose that on the text is to completely misunderstand the text. But there is one verse that does have a somewhat cosmological perspective. And I've seen Christian apologists like Ken Ham and some others try to use this verse as evidence that the Bible is teaching the earth is a sphere. But again, this verse is also completely silent about the shape of the earth in a cosmological sense. But it does teach us something very interesting about what the Hebrews thought of the earth in a cosmological sense. And they got this little bit of information correct based solely on faith. And this is very interesting, and I think you will find this interesting. The verse is Job 26:7. He spreads out the northern skies over empty space. He suspends the earth over nothing. Now, to understand where this biblical writer is coming from, you need to understand that all around the Hebrew people, the pagan cultures had a polytheistic world, and they always had a God who was holding up the earth. But the Hebrew people knew that none of those gods existed because their God was transcendent. He existed outside of time and space, and he created time, space, matter, everything, and therefore God was not standing there holding up the earth. And therefore, the earth must have been suspended on nothing. And that would have been a radical claim back then. People would have thought that was absurd. Oh, so you believe that your God just hung the earth on nothing? How could that be? And so it's pretty amazing that just based on their faith alone, they got that little bit of cosmology absolutely correct. So you have to give the Hebrew people some props here. This one instance where this is a cosmological perspective, they got it absolutely correct, simply based on their faith that their God is transcendent and not standing there holding up the earth must be hanging on nothing. But then again, this verse is not teaching that the earth is a sphere, and it's not teaching that the earth is flat. This verse is silent about the shape of the earth in a cosmological sense. It's merely making a spiritual point that pagan gods are not holding up the earth, and therefore the God who created the universe must have hung it on nothing. So I'm going to leave it right there. The Bible does not teach the earth is flat, and the Bible does not teach that the earth is a sphere. But the little bit of cosmology that we have in there, they got it absolutely correct, simply based on their faith that the God who created the universe is transcendent. And I actually think that's quite amazing.